Welcome to The Game Changers. I'm Sue Anstis, and this is the podcast where you'll hear from trailblazing women in sport. These are the women who are driving change and knocking down barriers to challenge the status quo for women and girls across society. I'd like to start with a big thank you to our partners Sport England, who support The Game Changers through the National Lottery. My guest today is Radha Balani, a much respected industry professional who's having a huge impact in the sport for development arena. Radha started her career in the university sports sector before working for leading organisations in sport, including the Football Foundation, Women in Sport, London Sport, and now as co-managing director of Think Beyond. Radha, can I take you right back to your student days at Loughborough and what led you to Loughborough in the first place?
So when I was 14, I played in a hockey tournament there, and they were all walking around in shorts with their collars up and sunglasses on this incredible campus that was unlike anything I'd seen before, and that was where I was going. The moment I heard it was the best for sport, I was like, that's where I'm going to go. The only sort of adjunct to that was I also had a bit of a desire to go to a college in the States. But actually, the actual academic part wasn't what I wanted out there. So, yeah, Loughborough was the only one I was really interested in. The other 5 that went on the UCAS form were just to fill the form out, quite frankly.
Very similar, very similar. And you mentioned hockey there. So how much was sport a part of your life growing up?
It has been and remains the fundamental core of my life. It's the way that I learned to communicate with my dad. It's the way that I have navigated being in a world that didn't necessarily feel like it was for me. And it's where I've had the best experiences and the worst experiences in my life. And that's been everything from, as soon as I got home from school, getting out of the school uniform, into shorts and t-shirt, getting down the rec and just playing, all the way through to actually taking it seriously, being part of lots of teams, playing in lots of different matches, 4 or 5, 6 matches a week sometimes across different sports. And it's also what I watch and I love, and now I get to work in it. So it's absolutely a fundamental part of who I am.
You mentioned your dad there and that relationship with him. So was he a sports fan, or was it watching sport together?
Both my folks are, my mum's more into sort of fitness and health, and my dad is super sporty. And I think I was 4, and he was watching a football match on TV. And I was basically being a pain, and I wanted his attention. So he sat me on his knee and he introduced me to football. And he introduced me to the fact that we are Liverpool fans. He was in the Merchant Navy, and his first experience in this country was docking in Liverpool. And so it was the Liverpool v Chelsea match, and Liverpool won. The first live match he and I went to was also Liverpool-Chelsea, as it turns out. And, something like that alongside, I remember him sitting me down and drawing a tennis court out and explaining the rules of tennis to me. Alongside both my parents just really wanting me to be part of all the different clubs and organisations, partly because they wanted me to be part of. We lived in a very white part of the country. And then the other part was they were running a local business, working every single hour that was available to work, every single day of the year, including Christmas Day. So I needed to be doing something because I was a slightly energetic child, shall we say. I broke a lot of arms very young. So I was in all of the clubs as well.
And you say that sport did it make you feel included in terms of that community?
It did, and at points it didn't. I think the older I've got, the more excluded sometimes I've felt because I'm more conscious of it. But definitely in terms of giving me an identity when, you're young and you're searching for those sorts of things, it was crucial from that perspective. Being able to do stuff with my time when you live in a sleepy village was also part of it. You know me, I quite like an audience. But I'm not great at, growing up, I wasn't great at one-on-one conversations. I found them really difficult. So being able to have them on a pitch with people and just be at a training session with people was a really, really fundamental part of my social life.
And you mentioned the academic side there of your studies. You and I studied the same course.
Sports science and English.
Yes, indeed.
Amazing.
So what drew you to study that? Books and games, as my brothers told me.
Running and reading was the other one I got given. I always wanted to be a sports journalist. That's what I thought I wanted. I love words. I love literature. I love the exciting things you can do with words, spoken, written, that change the way people feel. And I am obsessed with sport, as I think is clear. And I really, honestly, I wanted to present Grandstand. I wanted to write for The Guardian, for The Observer. And I got to the end of my first term at Loughborough, and I hadn't written one thing for the magazine. And I thought, is this really what you want? And actually, I realized it probably wasn't. And I guess before that, I'd already seen that there was this thing at Loughborough called AU President. I remember seeing it in the prospectus, and I remember thinking, that's what I want, before I'd even got there. So I think I was ready to go on a slightly different trajectory.
It's so interesting, isn't it? By way of reflection, I don't think I was ever really aware of the AU presidency. And I look back at the people that have been president. It's amazing, and the roles they've gone on to do. So I obviously missed that in the prospectus. But you obviously did that, and you were hall chair as well too. So what do you think you learned about yourself in those roles?
If I look back at it now, all I can really see are early indications of things that I wish I'd picked up sooner, if I'm being honest. If nothing else, the one thing I think I've learned is that I need to trust that I have the ability to make people care about something that I care about. Yeah, it's pretty tough to get elected at Loughborough. Yeah. People are quite tough, but actually it's a passion thing that I think has, if I look back on it now, I can see all the way through my life, internally and externally. My job is about making people excited about what's possible and asking them to buy into something. And so I think that I can look back and say, okay, I really learned that. I also learned, and I can, again, only see this in hindsight, how I poorly, when I was younger, dealt with stress. I learned that I really do like being put on the spot. I like performing under pressure. I like the environment of hustings and being able to think quickly about things. I really like being in service. And I think that is something that's come from my parents and all of us, my sister, myself, mum, dad, we're all about being in service. And that's a really big part of, I guess, our family.
You went on to work at what is now BUCS, the British University College of Sport. I recently heard a phrase I loved, that sport enables accelerated friendships. So what else do you think sport offers young people in further and higher education?
So I think there's sport for sport's sake that offers a place where you can either feel really included or really excluded. I think it offers an identity. It offers answers to questions like, I don't know what to wear out this evening. Oh, we're all wearing the same T-shirt. That's okay. I don't need to worry. But I think that sport has as much to offer as it has to take. And therefore, it's about our responsibility to use it with intention and to protect it, because I think we've seen it both ways. You know, I've absolutely felt part of because of sport, and I've absolutely felt entirely alienated by it. It's available to give people a load of things that it will automatically do. You will learn a set of skills, but I don't subscribe to it being magic. I really don't. I subscribe to the intentional use of it being utterly remarkable. And when done well, I have had the privilege of seeing it change lives. But I don't think that should take away from the pure joy of just playing. You know, and I don't necessarily mean putting on a full kit and going and playing. I mean, being in the park, shooting hoops and hearing the swish of the ball go through. I mean, doing keep-ups on the driveway and you get a new number. The joy of that is also just, that stuff still gives me goosebumps.
Your love of football took you on to the Football Foundation. So can you tell us more about the organisation and your role there?
I actually took a sort of, I guess, a sideways backward step from BUCS, now BUCS, took a pay cut to go to the Football Foundation. I played 5, 6, 7 sports, all to county level. But I think, football was the one that I stuck with, and I was part of football at a fairly formative part of its growth in terms of the year the decision was made that girls and boys couldn't play together was the year that I turned the age that separation happened. So I played for one of the first ever girls teams in the area. And I always knew that I wanted to work in football. So I took that step back, as it were, but it led to a number of steps forward. So I had about 5 different roles there, starting as a small grants project manager, all the way through to head of communications and corporate relations. And really my role there was when the Football Foundation was responsible for the community granting that it did on behalf of the FA, the Premier League and the government. So largest sports charity in the UK, really was about providing facilities and then supporting the development plan that goes on those facilities. And that was the majority of it. But the area I worked in, the area that I was passionate about, was the role of football for change and its ability to be part of the solution to some of the most challenging issues in the world. And so my role there was to be part of that, to help shape that, but then also to close it down when it was taken in-house by the Premier League. So I guess I got to see full circle.
And why do you feel football can be so powerful in changing lives?
I think it's a scale question. It's a scale and simplicity piece. I actually think that every single intervention, whether that's sport, art, music, can make a difference, but it is the scale and the universality of a sport that fundamentally just has the ball, and that ball doesn't have to be a real one. It can be rubber bands tied together. It can be a hacky sack. It can be made from trash. So I think it's about the scale of it that allows it to be the one that's used more often than anything else. But I think what we're seeing now in the role of Sport for Change is a broader variety of sports, so that, particularly in this country, football comes with baggage. It comes with baggage about who you support and where you're from. Whereas if you bring a new sport into the mix without that baggage, it's going to engage some of the people that don't want to engage in football. So I'm pretty sport agnostic these days. I feel like it's anything and everything. And I can get completely taken in by darts and snooker and tiddlywinks and sitting and seeing how many times I can throw a playing card into a bucket as I can by the Champions League final and everything in between, I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? You talk about that baggage that football comes with, and there's no doubt that men's football, especially in the UK, has many of those negative components, in my mind, often stemming from the hostility and tribalism that's so central to being a fan of the sport. I wonder whether you think the women's game will be able to flourish and thrive without those elements?
I think it's showing us that it can. I think it's showing us a space for families to enjoy sport together. One of my colleagues here, he sent me, he's a big Arsenal fan, and he was at the last game of the season and they were playing the women's Arsenal team's live match in the bar, sort of in the back of the stands before the game. And he sent me a little video of hundreds of men watching this game, rapt at the quality of it. And he just sent, love to see it. And I think that's also what we're seeing, is the quality of the football that's being played. I think it's remarkable. And I say that because I think that the quality has changed because we have professionalised it, not because it's women and girls playing, right? Will it thrive? I think with the Women's Euros, I think we are going to see something really different to the men's. We might see an equally powerful set of performances that take us to the final and hopefully win. But I think that the atmosphere and the tenor and the tone of things will be different. And that's just because it is different and doesn't need to be the same.
It's interesting, that part on quality, isn't it? I sometimes am wary myself of talking about the improvements in quality now, because I don't want to be negative about what's gone. And that's whether that's cricket or rugby or football or any of those things. But there is no doubt, with additional funding and training and all the support that goes around that, of course, the quality is going to move forward too. Is that where you've seen the biggest shift, do you think, in the game from when you were playing at university?
Oh my gosh, in so many ways. What I love is when I hear pundits criticising women's players. That's what I love, because then we're talking about them as athletes and their performance is being criticised in the same way that the Men's Premier League performances are criticised. I like that we are there. It's a totally different game from when I played. Everything from the sort of pitches we played on to the boys' kit that we wore, which was not designed for a woman my shape or a girl my shape, to I remember going to see an FA Cup final I think it was at Oxford United's ground. And then I remember that Channel 4 were there and they'd taken some footage. And there was a 30-minute piece on Channel 4 about it. And this is showing my age, Sue, I VHS recorded it and watched it over and over again because that was all we got, you know? And so it's changed at the grassroots level all the way through. And I think it's great.
It is interesting, isn't it, when you reflect back, it's not that far, as you say, not that far ago, and suddenly we're at Wembley and the crowds are as they are. You moved on from football to then work at Women in Sport as Head of Insights and Innovation. So for those that don't know, a little about Women in Sport and the role they play.
Sure. So for a long time, Women in Sport were a research-based organisation, and they still are, research and campaigning around, you know, the data that sits behind women's engagement or lack thereof across sports, the qualitative, insightful pieces that help us understand what drives that, whether that's personal, cultural, social, environmental, and then what interventions can those that offer sport put into play in order to ensure that every woman and girl, anyone who identifies as female, can reap the benefits that sport, when used well, has to offer. It's always about trying to remove that first layer of friction that means the opportunity is either not there or delivered poorly, that first sort of instance.
And obviously a lot of work, as you've mentioned there, has been focused on participation in girls and young women. And yet the statistics very recently released were so depressing. More than 1 million teenage girls in the UK, 43%, who considered themselves sporty, then became disengaged in sport following primary school. So what do you personally feel are the biggest, most significant reasons for this?
Do you know, I think I would hate to be a young kid right now in this world with the ability to see a set of lives that your friends are living or otherwise that they put out on social media that you don't know whether it's true or not, that there's a level of anonymity in criticism that can exist. And that sport is fundamentally about an expression of your body that is able to do things in a world where bodies are criticised left, right and centre, and in a world that is built by men and still driven by men largely. So it sort of doesn't surprise me with all of those external factors that you take the path of least resistance. And unless you have brilliant people around you that give you wonderful experiences, that includes failing as much as succeeding. It's hard to fight against a whole set of really powerful external factors that are ready to criticize, and therefore you can't really be authentic. And if nothing else, sport is about authenticity and being in the moment. I think that was one of the reasons I just didn't have the talent or the temperament to get as far as, because I couldn't be in the moment. I didn't know myself well enough. So on the field of play, I was either on the path that I'd just messed up or the one that I was going to mess up in the future, or the report in the paper the next day. It took me a long time to learn how to be where I was in that moment, just thinking about receiving the ball and where the next pass is going to be, or where's my position when I'm in goal for hockey, or whatever it was. So I think that there are too many external factors that bring challenges in. And listen, there's loads of stuff around how school sport has been decimated. There's loads of stuff around the fact that families are having to make some of the most difficult choices in the world right now. Do we have heat? Do I feed my children? That young people are scared that war is on our doorstep. And what does that mean for us? You know, we grew up in a time of relative peace, and this is new for young people that haven't had our experience. So I think the whole world is challenging for young people growing up. the quality, availability and provision of sport to be a positive outlet for that is always going to be inconsistent across the board because of the number of people engaged in it, and that it comes down to people. Ultimately, all of this is about people. I got really lucky at my state village tiny secondary school that we had the most incredible male PE teacher who absolutely insisted that we all played football, rugby, hockey, cricket, and that we all went to county trials, and that they would drive us around everywhere, and that we would go and watch matches, and that we would go on tour, and that we would get international players into our tiny little state school that had, 200 people in it.
So do you feel any optimism that things will change in the future? Because it almost feels like it's this impossibly huge shift. And I'm talking more specifically for younger girls and teenage girls moving forward.
Yeah, I do, because I feel like the shift is coming from women, for women a bit more. Some of the most challenging people I've worked with have been other women. And that makes me sad, But I do think that certainly with athletes these days, the ones that are really talking about who they are as humans and how they feel in their bodies and what does that mean to them, and how, someone like Molly Thompson-Smith, who's so proud to be strong and share that strength. I think that there are a greater number of broader role models that are offering space for women and girls. But I think there's also a greater understanding that sport can be whatever you want it to be. So the sort of funnels that we went down perhaps as a kid aren't there. And is it okay for, if someone just wants to go for a walk, that counts. That counts. It's not better or worse. It counts. It's what you want it to be.
Without expecting you to be the global expert on everything, but you've obviously worked across the world, and I wonder how female sports participation and teenage girls changes or is different across the Western countries in particular, but also in the US and Australia. Is there anything we can learn and implement around what they're doing, do you feel?
Where sport is statutory, countries are successful. Where you invest and you see it as part of education, as not only a necessary part of the body moving to allow the brain to re-energize, to understand that not everyone learns by sitting and listening, to recognize that there are physical learners out there. That's where I think there will always be greater impact. Where sport sits in the culture of a country is always a good indicator of what you're going to see. So I think that how a country views sport is fundamentally how it is delivered to young people in schools. And we can pretend that it isn't, but if we really, really look at our back pages and then we look at what's on offer and what's available, it's sort of there, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And alongside your more traditional office-based career, you also maintained a bit of a career teaching fitness out and across London. I was really interested to see. So I guess, what is it about teaching that you have enjoyed?
Do I think at my heart of hearts, I've always been a coach of some sort, always seeing the potential in people and being quite analytical. So sort of seeing how things could improve. And I've always been quite loud. You've met me. And, I was team captain and that sort of stuff. And I think that naturally led to coaching badges and things like that. And then I got fairly seriously injured when I was 20, and all of my competitive playing stopped at that point. So I haven't played team sports competitively now for 21 years. I did take up an individual sport later in life for a season or two, but I think through the rehab process for my knee and the various operations that I've had on it, I fell in love with the gym in a way that I just didn't have it as a kid, because I was at various training sessions. And it gave me that little stage that I needed and I didn't realise, but just the ability to be an instructor that looked kind of different to anyone else, different colour, different shape, that was about strength and technique, not about an aesthetic that I didn't have. but that I got to start my day every day engaging with people and having fun and training in the morning, and then putting a suit on and going to the office. It was great. And it was just extra pocket money that I didn't expect, and that was fun.
I'm intrigued to know what your other sport was that you did.
I picked up powerlifting.
Excellent.
I did one season as a competitive powerlifter. And to my point earlier about when I was younger, not being able to be in the moment, the work that I've done on myself from a mental health perspective in lots of different ways, I could see standing on that platform for each of those lifts in competition, I was able to go there and do that lift in the moment, knowing that that was all I needed to think about in the moment. And I was able to do that and you know, have some sort of mastery of my mind that I didn't have when I was younger. I loved it. I'd forgotten how competitive I was. Hadn't really forgotten that, to be fair. But I've never been in a sport as collegiate as powerlifting. No one ever wants anyone to fail a lift. Every single person wants you to succeed in every single lift you do, because ultimately it really is just about you and the bar and what you can do with it. It was a really friendly sport to be part of. I'm really glad that I did it.
And why did you stop?
Because I changed jobs.
Okay.
And I came here to Beyond Sport at the time and Think Beyond. I worked for both of them to start with, and now I'm really firmly Think Beyond. An international role with lots of travel. And the thing about powerlifting is it takes time, because you've got to rest between these sets to let the central nervous system come back. So I had a really great first season. I was number 1 in London in my weight category, 3 in England, and then top 10 in Britain.
Wow.
And that was probably on brute force and ignorance versus much technique, to be honest. But
just think what you could have done with technique.
Exactly. But I also think that 6 knee operations is more than enough. I might need to stop.
So tell me a little more, if you can, about your current role with Beyond Sport and Think Beyond.
So we are a global sport, social impact and sustainability consultancy. We work in sport and through sport. So we help sport do what it does better in terms of making a positive difference in this world, getting its own house in order in terms of the environment that it lives in and what it does to that environment, and how it is commercially successful, safe, full of integrity. So we work in sport to make sport better, and then we work through sport to change the world, whether that's for athletes, rights holders, brands, international governing bodies, federations, major tournaments, and everything in between. And really at the heart of it, we're strategists and really good project managers and great communicators and storytellers. And we've recently brought on board an incredible woman called Dr. Susie Thompson to really lead our sustainability work. So now we're able to look at sustainability as a whole as all 3 parts of that stool: social, environmental, and economic, and apply that through in the lens of sport. So, you know, how do we get sport to be better? How do we use sport to make a difference in the world? My job is so varied, Sue. We do timesheets through a consultancy. I look back at my day and I'm like, I've had the weirdest day. It makes no sense. So what, you know, I might be running a workshop for a client. I might be writing a press release for the opening of a safe space. I might be briefing the CEO of a major football club for a TV interview. I might be sitting down and doing a one-to-one with a member of staff. Might be working out how I can coach 5 young leaders from the States, even though I don't know their lives, and everything in between. It's a really varied, fascinating job. I'm really lucky, actually.
And I spoke to you as I researched my book, so thank you for that. And it was fascinating to get a better understanding of sport for development and how it differs from perhaps what we've perceived in the past as sports development, which you alluded to a little bit. So can you talk us through that?
Sure. So sport for development is about the other outcomes that we are directly delivering sport to achieve. So whether that is around gender equality, whether that's about health and hygiene, whether it's about teaching young people how to be safe around remnants of war in Cambodia, whether it's about HIV and AIDS awareness, or whether it's about nutrition, or wherever there are challenges in the world, when harnessed appropriately and delivered in a way that offers brilliant curriculum, we can teach other things through sport. Part of that is about the inherent things that sport allows us to bring to the table. Sometimes it is just that sport is the engagement piece and creates a space where conversations that would otherwise be difficult are more able to take place. Sometimes it is about finding common language. Sometimes it's about demonstrating the change, whether it's, you're playing a game and then you put a rule in that says anyone that's wearing a red t-shirt can't go past this line. How does that change your ability to play that game? Okay, what do we learn from that? How does that come together? It can be things like that, but it can also be something like surf therapy that is used to help young people deal with some significant mental health challenges. So, sports development is growing the sport for sport's sake, more people playing. Sport for development is about the change we make in people's lives, and we're intentional about it. And then the resultant change in society that comes from people changing.
And why do you feel that sport for development is so important specifically for women and girls?
Because the playing field, and by that I mean the world, is so unequal. It's so unequal in so many ways. The fact is that there are many countries still where women do not have the same rights as men. And so what better way to demonstrate the impact of inequality by taking a game that has a set of rules that everyone plays with and then changing the rules for one person. But also, it changes the role that women play in society. There's an amazing NGO that I absolutely adore called Free to Run. They use adventure sports and outdoor sports to engage with women who have been affected by or are living in conflict zones. The visibility of a woman running in Afghanistan adds some agency and legitimacy to that woman's role in society, that the answers to peace and conflict resolution will come from women being at that table. And so we have a responsibility as sport to showcase the capacity and the capability of women where we can. And it's not better than men. It's absolutely that we are in this together and we'd like to play our role because we have a role to play.
And you're also working with many high-profile former athletes. You mentioned Molly there earlier, or current and former athletes who are now using their platforms to drive sustainable social change. So do you think that's a change we'll see more of, a trend we'll see more of in the future?
Definitely, and I think it's happening earlier in players' careers, much earlier. Often it was as part of retirement and the what next. But actually what we're seeing, and certainly from some of the work that I've been lucky enough to do with UK sport and the athletes I've spoken to through that, things that they care about now and recognising that they have the platform to do something about it. And for some, that's about advocacy. For some, that's about action. And both are important. Often it depends on the nature of the sport you're playing, the type of support you have financially to do so, what sort of space and bandwidth do you have for this. But also, I think there's a greater understanding that athletes are whole human beings. I remember one athlete told me, I don't remember the last time someone asked me what book I'm reading. That I am a whole human being, that I have, and yes, I am training myself to perform optimally, but part of that optimum performance is about seeing me as a whole human person. And that is every part of me and the stuff that I care about and my value set and where I exist in this world and what my identity is outside of the numbers that I post. And I think that with a widening narrative on authenticity, on mental health, on belonging, we talk about DE&I, the next narrative is belonging, i.e. do I have to change myself to be in this space? Because if I do, that's fitting in, that's not belonging. Can I bring me as I am to this space? And I think that as that narrative continues to grow, both in the workplace, out of the workplace, in society, I think we will see more and more athletes bringing their whole selves to the table. And that will ultimately mean that we are hearing and seeing more of them do some of the incredible things that we've seen from the likes of Kate and Helen Richardson-Walsh, Tom Daley, Tanya Gray-Thompson, Michael Johnson, a million others that we can all name. And I love that it's a million others that we can all name, because before it wasn't. It was one or two. Back in my Football Foundation days, there were a couple of key players that would always show up and they'd always be brilliant, but there were only a couple.
And you mentioned kind of the mental health of athletes there too. And I know you've spoken very openly in the past about your own mental health struggles over the last 20 or so years. How are things for you today, and what's helped you?
You know, I feel incredibly lucky that I have been able to get the help that I did. And sometimes the odds were not in my favour to get that, and sometimes I didn't get it. But I can look back on the last 20 odd years and see that I probably wouldn't have been ready for some of it when I thought I needed it as well. I took 3 months out at the end of 2019 to go into a residential trauma and eating disorder facility in the States. I've been in therapy for 20 years. I recognise and know that there are things that don't help me in this world. And some of those things include alcohol. I don't drink. I haven't had a drink for almost 8 years. And I know that there is a set of medication that I need to take that keeps me in a place where I can make clear decisions every day with the right intentions, and I can treat myself in a way that is nicer than perhaps sometimes my head will tell me. So, I take medication every day for depression, anxiety, ADHD, and complex PTSD. Those are non-negotiables. That I write a gratitude list every night, and I share that with 3 other women. And those are non-negotiables. And we share that, and suddenly I'm sharing the detail of my day with other people. And so when things are difficult, it's a little bit easier for Miss Stubborn over here to pick up the phone and say, and actually I still struggle with that. But these women now know me so well that when my gratitude lists become a bit monosyllabic, they pick up the phone and say, what's going on? And it's just, those sorts of things are my non-negotiables. I remain in therapy to this day. And I talk about this, and I create a space every single day for everyone in our team here at Think Beyond to give me a number out of 10 to check in, to send me an emoji, to send me a gift, to send me a word. Some days people use it, some days they don't. Some months go by and some people won't use it. But every single day I consistently offer that out so that everyone knows there is a space that is non-judgmental, that is confidential, and that is theirs. And I will drop everything if someone says they need that space. And I've been fortunate enough that people have trusted me with things because that space has been there. And they might never have sent me a check-in number in their lives, but they will say, Radha, can I have 10 minutes? And then we'll have a conversation.
So in terms of advice to other employers, it feels like Think Beyond and Beyond Sport have created that inclusive, supportive environment where you find yourself there. And clearly you're contributing to that too. But what advice would you give to other employers in terms of caring for staff?
Openness and intentionality about it. It can't be a poster on the wall saying call EAP. It's 2 parts. It's about creating an environment that doesn't drive poor mental health, but also one that can cope with those that are having mental health challenges, whether they have been driven by a work scenario or not. It's not a simple thing. And I think when workplaces can consider mental health in the same way they consider physical health, it's a slightly different narrative. And I would say that here, me going and saying I need 3 months sick leave, when actually on the outside it probably didn't look like there was anything wrong, to be so warmly given that time, supported all the way through, welcomed back with open arms. And I've gone on and done so much more as a result of it, but also that work has allowed me to be open about what it was, and so in here, pretty much everyone knows, and that's fine, because just it's not something I ever heard about as a kid, and certainly not from my background. And I didn't look like the archetypal person that had the challenges that I've had. So to contend with that as well, and to be able to say it, if nothing else, it's just an act every day of me showing some faith in myself, even if I don't feel it.
And we saw some really sad research last week that highlighted a significant, often hidden prevalence of anxiety, depression and eating disorders amongst female footballers competing in WSL and the Championship. So do you feel we're doing enough to protect the mental well-being of elite sportswomen and men?
I think you could just take away the profession for a moment and just consider these people as optimum performers. And if we consider it from that perspective, I'm not sure that any businesses have got it quite right. So we consider them as people working at the highest level in what they do. How does that predispose them to these things? And what can we do to then put in place a set of support networks that allow them to be safe? I think sport, as much as it's saying it is in a different place with this, I'm not sure that it's necessarily living up to it. I still think there are still beliefs that you can't let anything get in the way of performance and that performance is everything. I don't know. It's a really good question, Sue. It's a really good question. I wonder whether actually my answer is I just don't think anyone's good enough at it because it's so complex. Can we create conditions where everyone can be themselves on a good day, bad day, and indifferent day? And when it's bad, what can we do? Maybe it's more simple than I think.
And talking about it too, isn't it? I think that although the research made me really sad when I saw it, at least it's out there and we're perhaps having that conversation and people recognising they're not alone in their bubble of where they exist.
And recognising what sits behind that. What sits behind an eating disorder has nothing to do with food, right? Why are some of our young footballers trying to seek control from elsewhere? And is the football environment, the elite football environment, causing them to feel as though they have no agency over their life, so they're going to take control here? Those are the big questions that actually need to be spoken about. And those are the ones that people don't want to talk about. It's really easy to turn an eating disorder into something that's about food and weight when it's nothing to do with that.
That's such a good point. Such a good point. I'm so glad I asked you that huge question at the end there. And finally, you've already achieved so much across your career, but I just wonder, what does the future hold for you as you sit and look ahead?
I'm really excited about the fact that we've been working in this world of social impact, sport, shared value, and we've been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years, and now we're starting to see the rest of the industry come forward. So we have a wonderful opportunity here to really, really harness the experience and expertise that we've built up alongside Beyond Sport with our global network. And then alongside Dr. Susie Thompson and the expertise she brings to us to truly, truly continue to raise the bar in terms of sports' role in this world and sports' role as an industry. And I'd really like to think that we can bring others with us along the journey. I don't think it's just us. I think there are other people that need to be part of this, that push us to be better, that we push to be better. And that if you're a rights holder of brands, an athlete, a professional sports team, club, league, that you recognise your role in and of yourself as an organisation, and you recognise the opportunity you have to make a difference in the world, and you recognise how valuable that is to the bottom line of your business, and then we bring it all together under one space. And I'd like think Beyond to continue to lead in that space, but I'd like other people to come and play in the sandbox too. Not scared of competition. I think it makes us all better. For the kid that probably still wants to present grandstands, and I still do want to do that, I guess what I see the future as is almost all of those bits that I love doing, facilitating a conversation, creating a space for people to say things that they didn't even know that they thought, and then to sew it all back up for them with a set of ideas that they can go and use to change the world. I just want to keep doing that, but most importantly, I want to do it with people that are brilliant, and I feel really lucky to work with brilliant people who push me to be even better, and who I have an opportunity to help them find who they are as their whole selves and bring their whole selves to them.
As always, it was such a privilege to talk to Radha, and I thank her for her incredible openness and honesty in all she shares. If you'd like to hear about other women driving change across the sport, do visit fearlesswomen.co.uk, where there are details of all of my guests from this and the previous series. You can also listen to all the podcasts on the website and find out about the Women's Sport Collective, a network for all women working in sport. You can sign up for Changing the Game, our free weekly newsletter, which highlights the developments in women's sport. And there's more about my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. Thanks again to Sport England for backing the Game Changers through the National Lottery, and to our production team at What Goes On Media, including executive producer Sam Walker and Rory Auskery. Finally, thank you to my brilliant colleague, Kate Hannon at Fearless Women. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook at Sue Anstis. And if you have 5 minutes, it would be great if you could rate or review the podcast, as it makes a big difference to help us reach new audiences. The Game Changers. Fearless Women in Sport.